A few hours after Thanksgiving in 1991, the police visited a home in California following a call they had gotten. Right from the entryway, the home was just a nightmare to behold. There were red stains everywhere. In the bedroom, the mattress was wet and soaked in red vital body fluids, and the bedpost was broken. The bathroom was just like a scene out of a horror movie. A human torso was found, skinned and gutted, and was hanging off the bathtub, suspended by clothing hangers and draining into the tub. In the kitchen, the police found human hands that had been deep fried in a deep fryer. On a plate on the kitchen counter was cooked human flesh with a side of cranberry sauce. Then in the fridge was a human head which had been wrapped in foil and was being refrigerated after it had been deep fried. Before I dive into this particular case, I would like to ask you to click that subscribe button right there, give the video a thumbs up so that YouTube can recommend it and other people will get to see it. If you've noticed, my views are not exactly where they should be, even though I put a lot of work and effort into this. You'll be helping me to grow when you subscribe and like this video, so thank you for subscribing. With that being said, let's look into the case of Omaima Nelson. Omaima Irene Nelson was a beautiful young woman who was born in her home country of Egypt. Life growing up for Omaima was, tough. She was born in Egypt quite okay, but she grew up in a hard environment in a small settlement close to Sudan. Growing up was a horrible experience for Omaima. She saw everything a child should not see. She was beaten and abused by her father, who was a good-for-nothing parent. She became a victim of assault at a young age, both from her father and other men. Add that to the trauma of genital mutilation, and you will see Omaima saw hell growing up. In all of this, her mother wasn't spared either. She too was being maltreated by Omaima's father, and Omaima watched all of this happen. She witnessed her father on numerous occasions beat the crap out of her mother. Eventually, they did get away from the stronghold of her father, but life after that wasn't any better. He was the only breadwinner they had known all their lives, so moving away from him was very difficult. It really affected them. You can imagine trying to survive without any form of skill to get work to help with food and shelter. They had to do what they could to survive, so Omaima and her mother moved to a slum called the City of the Dead. This place is so called because it's practically full of graveyards, and even the shanty they lived in at the time was built on people's tombs. Living here was very bad, and Omaima in her head is thinking she would do anything to get out of her situation. In fact, she vows to get out of poverty. Fast forward to when she turned an adult. I think she was about, 18 years old or so. Omaima's path crossed with this American who at the time had traveled to Egypt to work on an oil drilling project. These two instantly had a connection and they began a relationship soon after. Omaima put all her effort, everything she had, into this love affair. Remember I pointed out earlier how she so badly needed to get out of her sad state of a life situation. So if this white man was her way out, she wasn't going to mess it up. Her mother pushed her to get married to the white man. So by 1986, Omaima and this man were married and he brought her over to the United States where they stayed in his hometown of Texas. First, things were good between them, then they were not. That marriage fell apart super quickly soon as they got to the United States. It's not exactly clear what the cause of the split was, but after the separation, once again, Omaima finds herself back at square one, and Omaima began to drift and unable to fend for herself. She had no other choice than to go look for a job. It was either she found something to do or she would starve, so she went looking for jobs. Just any type of job that will hire her, which was not a lot because she could hardly speak proper English. Her English was broken, and without prior job experience, it was difficult landing anything meaningful. But she was very good with kids though, so she mostly got the nanny position. She worked as a nanny or sometimes as a housekeeper for anyone who could, look beyond her lack of fluency in English. But the pay of a nanny wasn't exactly good, so her second option was to become a model. She was young and pretty, so modeling seemed to be a good fit as she had the looks for it and didn't have to talk much as a model, but that too couldn't foot the bills because she wasn't getting gigs as such. In her desperation, Omaima began to sell her body for money, and as her confidence grew as a street worker, she added another profession to it: armed robbery. Omaima would sometimes rob her clients of their possessions. Literally, she would hold them up with a weapon until she got whatever she wanted from them. If you didn't empty your pocket, your life was at risk. This quickly became Omaima's new gig. When she was not doing that, you will find her freeloading on a man and living rent-free at his place until she gets another target. With time, Omaima had evolved in her game, and she gradually became this very manipulative and conniving woman that would purposely go after rich men for their money. Married or not, she didn't care, she didn't give a crap. Gold digging and stealing steadily became the only way she knew how to survive. Gorgeous and slender, with olive skin and doe-like eyes, Omaima was determined to use what she had to get what she wants. So the exotic beauty established a pattern of seducing older men, tying them up during intimate acts and robbing them of their valuable possessions. Eventually, Omaima moved to the state of California from Texas and settled in Orange County, where she continued, her lifestyle. In November of 1990, Omaima was convicted of assaulting a man she had had intimate relations with in Huntington Beach, I think. His name was Robert Hansen. What happened was that during a tryst, she tied Hansen up and demanded money while pointing a weapon at him like she was doing back in Texas. When it was all over with, Hansen went straight to the authorities to report, and Omaima was arrested and convicted. It was shortly after this incident that Omaima met a man called Bill Nelson. The major attraction for Omaima was Bill's word and his braggadocious attitude. Bill Nelson was just the type of man that Omaima targeted on the regular. Rich and show-offish with the in-your-face fashion of different brands and big belt buckles, cowboy boots, and expensive cars. There was more to Bill Nelson though. He was said to be an ex-pilot who had been helping the cartel to move merchandise around the US, and this had landed him in serious trouble. He had even done a 4-year stint in jail for his crimes. So Bill Nelson met Omaima in October of 1991 at a bar where he had been spending money buying drinks for the patrons and loudly boasting of how much wealth he had acquired and the size of his lands in the Midwest. Of course, this was going to get the attention of the gold-digging Omaima, so she made her move and applied her charm. Fast forward to just a few days later after they met, and the 56-year-old Bill Nelson was married to the 23-year-old beautiful damsel Omaima Nelson. Omaima was the one who organized the shotgun wedding that was officiated by an Egyptian priest. So now that they were man and wife, Bill Nelson had an addition of things to brag about: a 33 years younger damsel who he now called his wife. But meanwhile, Bill Nelson had deliberately decided to keep part of his life a secret. He decided not to let Omaima know that at the time he was still legally binded with his first wife. They were only separated and not divorced yet. I think he did this in order to, trap Omaima. What he didn't know was that it was actually Omaima who was out to trap him. So after their shotgun wedding, Bill took Omaima to meet his family members out of state, back home in Texas and Arkansas, to at least, introduce her to them. But this visit was not entirely as he wanted it to go. His extended family and children could see right through his new bride. The huge age difference plus the manner in which they got married so quickly didn't sit well with them. Aside this, some of Bill's children were about Omaima's age, if not even older than her. They just didn't believe that an immigrant who could barely speak proper English would genuinely fall in love and marry a man old enough to be her father. Something was definitely fishy in this relationship, but Bill Nelson would hear none of that. He wanted a trophy, and Omaima was it. He was asked to let her know, at least, that he was still married, but he refused to take that advice. Bill and Omaima returned to California, and life began for them as a married couple. They lived in a well-furnished home in Costa Mesa, California. Omaima was enjoying being spoiled by Bill, It was like at long last her dreams was coming through. She was living the life she wanted, dressing in expensive brands and driving expensive cars. Basically, life was good until December of 1991. So on the 1st of December 1991, in the wee hours of the morning, Omaima drive Bill's red Corvette to this home that was owned by a man named Jose. She was pounding on the door for the homeowner to let her in, but Jose would not open the door. He had kind of freaked out because he had seen the red Corvette parked in his driveway, but he hadn't seen who drove it, since it was still dark outside and he had been asleep when the person parked the Corvette. Now, someone was banging at his door and he definitely wasn't going to open it. He didn't even ask who was there. He just kind of like pretended like he wasn't home. So eventually the person got back into the car and drove off. But later on in the day at about 1 p.m. the car was back and Jose looked through the window to see that it was Omaima who had driven the car to his home. He knew her. They had in fact dated for a couple of weeks sometime in the past, about a year prior I think. So she was actually an ex. But what was she doing standing at his door? He was wondering. Still wondering what could have brought Omaima to his home, he opens up the door for her to come in, only for him to see that Omaima's body was full of cuts, bruises, and lacerations. She was hysterical, crying that her husband had assaulted her and beat her up. Just then, in a twisted turn of events, she just opens up the trash bag that she was holding. She actually came in with a trash bag. She opens up this trash bag that she was holding and showed Jose the contents of the trash bags, which to his horror were human organs and tissues. Jose thought this was just a case of an ex crying to him about her husband had hurt her. But now, in his shock state, he just stood there listening as Omaima told him how she had to kill Bill in self-defense, after which she proceeded to cut his body into pieces and take out some organs. I bet in Jose's head he was like, what about self-defense is this that you not only take someone's life but you also take time to dismember them and then pack up the organs in a bag and walk about with it. It just wasn't making sense. Well, Omaima was at Jose's house because she needed his assistance to remove Bill's teeth so he wouldn't be identified, and for him to also help dispose of the rest of the body and clean up the crime scene, but just basically trying to cover up the crime she had committed. She offered Jose 2 motorbikes and the sum of $75,000 if he accepted to help her. Jose at the back of his mind is thinking, is this chick crazy? Why would she even think of coming to me with such a request? Not knowing what Omaima was capable of doing, he didn't let his thoughts out. He instead played calm and told Omaima to go ahead, that he was right behind her in his car, and she believed him. So as soon as she drives off, he picks up his phone to call the authorities and tell them what he had just seen and witnessed. The police, after getting Jose's call, immediately swung into action and they intercepted Omaima while she was still in the red Corvette. She still had the trash bag with her, the bag that contained Bill's organs with her in the car. It was just sitting right there on the passenger seat when she was stopped by the police. The police took her to the home where she lived with her husband, Bill Nelson, and they conducted a thorough search. In the apartment, they found huge suitcases which had trash bags in them, and in these trash bags were stuffed with body parts. Right from the entryway, the home was just a nightmare to behold. There were red stains everywhere, on the wall, on the floor, on the furniture, including a pressing iron and lamp that were all stained red. There were broken shards of glasses that had stains on them all around the apartment. In the bedroom, the mattress was wet and soaked in red vital body fluids and the bedpost was broken. Moving on to the bathroom, which was just like a scene out of a horror movie, a human torso was found skinned and gutted and was hanging off the bathtub, suspended by clothing hangers and draining into the tub. Like, what the hell did Omaima do? Proceeding to the kitchen, the police found 2 human hands alongside chicken, or was it turkey now, that had been deep fried in a deep fryer, and on a plate on the kitchen counter was cooked turkey meat mixed with human flesh with a side of cranberry sauce. Then in the fridge was a human hair which was immediately identified as Bill's. It had been wrapped in foil and was being refrigerated after it had been deep fried. Omaima had told the police after all this discovery that her husband Bill was out of town for business in Florida. But before he left, he had taken someone's life, and the remains they had found was that of the person Bill had claimed his life before he left. At this point, it had not even occurred to her that the police had recognized Bill's hair she had placed in the fridge. When she was told that they already found Bill in the fridge, she began to spin a web of lies and make up stories that wasn't making sense nor adding up. Omaima was arrested on the 2nd of December, and during her interrogation, she tried to, just go down the insanity road like most of these people do, claiming she was hearing voices in her head and that an Egyptian demon had told her and made her to cut her husband down and dismember him. She claimed if she didn't do that as the Asian demon wanted, Bill would not be able to cross over to the other side, so that's why she dismembered and removed his organs. You can imagine. She also went on to tell the police how abusive Bill had been towards her, and in a very cringy way, she kept referring to him in the present as if he was still alive. She began to spin the whole self-defense story she had initially fed Jose with. Remember Jose, the guy she had called, started to, help dispose of the body. She said Bill has assaulted her and brutalized her and all of that. She told a story of how Bill would tie her up and beat her severely on several occasions if she refused to get kinky with him. On one occasion, she said he threw her cat out of the window of a moving car. And once, when she threatened to leave him, he beat the crap out of her after tying her up. She said she felt isolated with no one to turn to, but on that Thanksgiving weekend in 1991, during a particularly brutal assault, she fought back, took his life, and systematically dissected his body. Omaima had told the authorities this story of abuse and mistreatment, so the police decided to, check this out just to see if there was any truth to her story. So Omaima was taken to a local hospital and examined, and the doctor said that all the cuts and bruises on her were either deliberately self-inflicted or had been gotten from when she was going at Bill with a pair of scissors. So the injuries were in no way self-defense like she claimed. Plus, there was no indication that she had been assaulted like she said. Mind you, the lacerations and injuries on her body were quite serious. How can a sane human being just cut themselves and peel their skins and scratch up their faces just to make up a story? Bill Nelson's family could not just understand how this could happen. Bill had just spoken to his daughter and had asked her to come over for Thanksgiving with Omaima and himself. But Margaret, Bill's daughter, had turned down the invite for obvious reasons. This had been on Thanksgiving Day, right? It was on that same day that Omaima had done this to Bill. What could have gone wrong between the time Bill spoke to his daughter Margaret and when Omaima had cut him into pieces and eaten him up as a meal? The police could only piece things together based on the evidence at hand. It was speculated that Omaima had on that day found out that the marriage between she and Bill was not valid because he was still married to his first wife. She became very angry when she got to know this information. It's not clear how she came across this information, but she had to do whatever she could do to get something out of him before she lost it all. I mean, she was a gold digger. I already said that. She was with Bill for the money. Being married to him was her only claim to some form of stability. And now she finds out that if Bill chose her out today, she had nothing that she could claim. She had no claim to anything because in the eyes of the law, they weren't even married. So Omaima hatched the plan to cajole Bill into giving her money, or she would get it from him anyways. So the conniving spirit in her decided to tie Bill up in a very vulnerable BDSM type of situation, which Bill had willingly agreed to, not knowing what Omaima had in mind for him. Had he known her dark intentions, I bet he wouldn't have agreed to be so vulnerable with her. So after getting Bill tied up and in a vulnerable position, she begins to demand for compensation for the time wasted with him, which he turned down. He refused to give her anything. Furious, Omaima began to take him apart, piece by piece, starting with his private parts. After castrating him, she then moved on to other parts. This woman tortured Bill Nelson with different articles, a pair of scissors, a side lamp, a pressing iron. She practically used any crude object she could lay her hands on. And she continued to smash his head with one or many of these objects at different times. She then stabbed him severally with a pair of scissors and cut him with a sharp kitchen utensil. After which she proceeded to cut off the hair and cut out the organs and tissues. Then she cut off the upper and lower limbs. Then she proceeded to skin the torso. It's very scary to think that such a delicate looking woman would do this all by herself. This is just a practical example of the saying, do not judge a book by its cover. Not everybody looks like what they have in their mind. Well, after finding Bill in bits and pieces, the police tried to get all the parts together, but they couldn't find all the missing parts of Bill Nelson. A chunk of him was still missing, and Omaima wasn't saying where these parts were or what she had done with it. After speaking with some of her neighbors who claimed they have heard the disposal units in Bill and Omaima's apartment running for hours through the night of Thanksgiving, it was assumed that since it was Thanksgiving, the garbage truck must have come around and disposed of the garbage Omaima might have thrown in the trash, which could easily have contained the almost 100 pounds or so of Bill's missing flesh. But ultimately, they got to find out what had exactly happened to the about 100 pounds of the missing body parts after Omaima eventually spoke to a psychologist who had been called in to pick her brain. She said, just listen, she said she put on red shoes, red hat and red lipstick before chopping up and cooking her husband's body. She said she then prepared his ribs like in a restaurant and had eaten it with a side barbecue sauce. So Omaima had actually cooked up the missing portion that the police were looking for, and she had eaten them with a side sauce. Let me paraphrase. She said, nothing is sweeter than the taste of human meat, especially Bill's. It's so sweet, so delicious. I like mine tender. It's worthy to note that the doctors who had examined Bill's remains did say the precision with which Omaima had taken his head and limbs apart was too professional not to believe that she was an expert and this was not her first rodeo doing such a thing. But to this day, we do not know of any other cases like this that are linked to Omaima. While researching this case, that thought actually crossed my mind, and I hope she hadn't done this elsewhere and gone uncaught. Omaima eventually denied cooking and eating up her husband though. She said, quote, I swear to God, I did not eat any part of him. I am not a monster, end quote. But she still didn't say where the missing 100 parts went. While on trial, which began 1 year later on December the 1st, exactly 1 year after the crime, Omaima still claimed and maintained that B had assaulted her on several occasions, and on that Thanksgiving day, he had done it again. He had tied her up and assaulted her, but somehow she got herself untied after one of her hands came loose. So she reached for a table lamp and smashed it over his head. Then she grabbed a pair of scissors and drove it into his body severally to get him away from her. But conveniently, Omaima claimed to have no recollection of hacking his body into pieces and deep frying his remains. She said that after the slaying, she freaked out and must have fallen into a trance-like state. Listen, how does one spend 12 hours hacking up a body to simplify disposal, yet they are not aware of what they're doing? This woman and lies are like 5 and 6, I must say. The prosecutors, on their part, provided evidence that countered Omaima's version of events. They were able to prove that it was Bill who had actually been tied up, as he had obvious signs on his wrists and ankles that supported this, while Omaima had none. So she was lying about what had happened on that day. The psychologist that examined Omaima did diagnose her with PTSD as a result of what her father did to her back in Egypt and all the things she had gone through as a child. And he said she was psychotic during the crime. But that didn't deter the court from sentencing Omaima to 28 years to life for what she did to Bill Nelson. After she was found guilty of second-degree murder on January the 12th, 1993, 6 days after jury deliberation, just barely 2 years after she committed this gruesome crime. She appealed the sentence but lost in 1995. This is not where the story ends though. Omaima, while incarcerated, still managed to get married to a very wealthy 70-something years old man who was confined to a wheelchair. He has long passed away, leaving her a huge chunk of money, so her gold digging had paid off actually. But how is she going to enjoy all of that money while she's incarcerated? In 2006, Omaima was eligible for parole. During the hearing, Omaima had given the great speech of how she was a changed person and not a monster, and how she didn't eat her husband. But when she was asked why she cooked him then, she couldn't give any answer at all. Margaret, Bill's daughter, and a prosecutor, Randy Paulo's case, spoke against her release, and the parole board listened. They denied her release because commissioners found her unpredictable and a serious threat to public safety. She was again eligible in 2011, and she still maintained that she was a changed person and eager to live the good life God meant. But still, she was denied parole, considering the gravity of the crime and how she had never for once accepted responsibility for her actions. It wasn't considered wise to let her loose into civilization just yet. Her next hearing will be in 2026. She is currently serving her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, California. Bill Nelson was a kind, loving, and trusting man who was taken advantage of by Omaima in the worst imaginable way. Even though he had his flaws and wasn't perfect, nobody is, and no one deserves an end as cruel as he got. So that's it for today's case, guys. Kindly hit that subscribe button before you go. If you like my videos and want to see me grow, it's important for you to subscribe and turn on that notification so you don't miss any of my uploads. So until next video, stay safe.